Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Welcome
Interesting
back.
that we're doing this talk. Thank you. Yeah, you too. You're probably going to pass out from your Italian Easter lunch. It's still
It's a
morning here. So
possibility.
it's so interesting we're doing this talk on Easter. I love the resurrection, all those archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow in America, we got it with chocolate bunnies and colored eggs. But hey, who knows what that's all about?
Right.
In our last talk, we were talking about the superego. And I had this idea, and I'm sure it's not unique, but this idea of how ancestral lineage healing is connected to that, right? So if we consider superego has its cultural imprint of limitation beliefs, limiting beliefs, certainly there is a familial lineage.
Absolutely.
And, I'm sure similar to you, we've done all these different things, whether it was sort of the Buddhist thing or the Hindu thing, some definitely shamanic practices. My Lakota teachers used to talk about this. I never really connected with it. We'd set up the altar, I put up the pictures and whatever. And as a guy who never was raised around my family, being that we were nomads my whole life. So my parents were Iranian, but I never really lived there. And I was always in different countries. I never really connected with that. I certainly was very aware of what it did to us, the lineage, even for me living in Nigeria or Pakistan or US, very specific emotional blockages or whatnot would be there, which I would always connect back. I was like, oh, this is weird. This really feels like grandfather or grandmother or something like that. And I just want to talk about that a little bit. And the reason I want to talk about it, a couple of months ago, I had a very profound experience with my father, who's been deceased now for about three some years. And I'll get into that. I just want to talk about that. The idea of the lineage healing, similar to the superego. My Lakota teachers used to say that when you work with ancestral healing, you heal 8 generations back, but you also heal 8 generations forward, which was not in the terms of Newtonian physics, doesn't make sense, but in terms of quantum physics, either reality is not happening or everything is happening simultaneously. So in not a strange way, it actually makes sense that if you're actually working on yourself, and as we both well know, you can't fix, cure, heal anyone. You can only work on yourself. And through that, lo and behold, it actually frees the lineage. And that sounds like a bunch of kind of hogwash sometimes because we're so focused in our lives and the present, but it has been my experience as a clinician. And one of the things I tell the people that I work with who have children who are worried about their kids or in a situation where they can't control what's happening with their kids or grandkids, and I mean this literally, I'm not saying it figurative speech, is like work on yourself, clear the things you can clear, because that actually allows them to go forward without carrying the baggage that you were given to carry.
Yeah.
So I really do feel this. And as a guy who works with this incarnational stuff, I really have seen it. I know my own experience, your experience. We really, a part of our incarnation is to help clear the family lineage.
Yeah.
We came with specific tools they didn't have. Now, certainly both me and you, given everything we've dealt with, it's not pleasant business. But there is something to that. So I want to look at it from that lens, right? And again, to reiterate this point, when we transform ourselves, we transform the lineage. Even someone like me, for you, having lived in Italy, being from Italy, maybe you have more connection, you probably do, than someone like me. I have no connection psychically. Psychic is the wrong word. I have no connection physically with my lineage, being that I've been away from, quote unquote, the physical lineage. It makes no difference. Living in different continents, they've been with me. Now, I'll get to what brought this conversation up. But I'll tell you something funny happened on the way to the office. I'm working on our work 3 days ago. Friday. I'm working, taking some notes, kind of getting some clarity what we need to talk about. There's somebody I have business with. I had made a call to their office, and they hadn't called me back 3 days. And I had dealt with this person before. I didn't know the person, but I dealt with him a year ago, one phone conversation. And it's just funny, the synchronicity. I was just actually laughing at this. So I call this gentleman, and he's got my caller ID. He's like, Assadi, that's weird. You are the next person to call. I've made 48 calls today. You were the next one. This is so weird. You just called. You must be psychic or something. Now, this stuff happens to me because unconsciously, psychically, I'm pretty dialed into things. So, and usually I just laugh it off. But this time something told me like, I need to say something. So I go, well, as a matter of fact, actually, that's a part of what I do. He's like, no shit. He's a really interesting guy. He's this sort of good old working class upstate boy, right? Like not into this stuff. I'm like, yeah, actually I do. And we get into literally the conversation 30 seconds. It's like, my aunt just died and she's been talking to me. And I go like, well, you're not crazy. And, I'm like, well, do you smell her? Do you feel? She's like, oh my God, all those things. And as we're conversing, and again, this literally happens in 45 seconds. He goes, I was asking for a sign early this morning of hers for me to think that I'm not crazy. I cannot believe I just got this sign. Now, I'm telling this story. It's a fun story because we're going to go way, way woo-woo here. But, they quote unquote reach from the other side. Now we can be like, this guy's crazy, he, schizophrenic, whatever. Not my experience. But it's not just like, oh, you need to talk to ghosts. It is real. These energies are real. We're just so disconnected and so, again, hyper-individualized that we disconnect from these things. So you don't need to be talking to your dead aunt. But certainly I can assure you, as someone who's done this work day in, day out, those energies are real. And whether it's just your psyche, I don't care about these things. I have nothing to prove here. I can just tell you, this is energy available. If you're willing to work on it, it'll make your life easier. So again, the superego, the family lineage, there's a connection there, right? It's about freeing these limiting beliefs. As someone who does spiritual work, that's why it's there. Now, as someone who studied in cultures where people burn incense every day and talk to the ancestors, you can do that till the cows come home and not have a connection. Certainly was my experience.
Yeah.
Now, why am I having this conversation with you? As a guy who's worked with death and dying, when I used to work, especially in the really painful days in the 80s with AIDS patients, people were dying all the time. When these young men would die, not always, not seldom, enough times, and this is when I was having my Kundalini experiences, so I was very open, I would get a sign. And the sign, many times, was a phone call. The phone would ring, and it was always these weird times. I registered it really quickly. This is when I was living in East Harlem. I had, those old school red clocks with the digits on them. So the phone would ring. No iPhones there. I would walk up to the phone. I'd pick it up. Usually it'd be dead silence or a lot of times static. And I started learning to register what time it was. It'd be like 2:32. I'd go back to the hospital the next day, and John Doe had died at 2:32. I'd talk to the nurses, to the charts. And then I started doing some research on this, and those days, again, no computers. There's actually a book written on this, phone calls from the other side, some real cheesy name thing, but it's a thing, right? It's an occurrence. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is when I would talk to the docs, to the nurses, to people, one-on-one, everybody has some story of some quote-unquote weird experience, but somehow in public, everyone thinks they're going to be called crazy, which they would. So they never talk about it. So it's actually way more common than people realize. Yeah. Now, again, no teeth in the game. The reason I'm sharing this story is when my father died, he wasn't with me in this country. So he had severe dementia. And when he died, I never saw him. He left. And it was a very odd thing because here I am with these people. I wouldn't call them strangers because I have so much love for these men. But, we had a connection. But I loved my father. He loved me. We had a very connection. But he had severe dementia. But he was also someone who lived in terror. And part of what the lineage story I want to share with you, my father really was born into abject poverty. So more insanely than that, the day he was born was actually like in the afternoon. They thought he was dead. So they take his body. What they do in this tradition, they put cotton in the nose, they put cotton in the anus, whatever the reason, they wrap them, and they put him in another room. In the middle of the night, he starts crying. They realize he's not dead. So just imagine a newborn, he's taken, put in a room the level of terror this poor man had. And it just goes on and on from there. He was 4 years old when he started working. So he was actually working, sweeping a floor at 4. It just makes you want to cry. The level of pain this man had to endure. He was stabbed for a pencil when he was 7. When people say, I walked barefoot in the snow, like He actually walked barefoot in the snow. So this went on and on and on. So there was a lot of terror in this man. And he was a very gentle soul. So as a guy who was raised in a family of opium addicts who had the bejesus kicked out of him every day, he never lifted a finger. When he was going to go to college, he got into, like, this is very interesting too, he was highly intelligent. So there was some lottery that if he took some tests, he was the number one out of like tens of thousands of people in the city that he was raised in. He couldn't afford to go in because he didn't have the money to buy the pillow. You needed a pillow and a covering and a sheet to go. Like, this is the level of poverty these people lived in. So then his family all gathered and bought this for him, his distant family. So I'm just laying the groundwork for a level of terror that this man left. So here he is. He passed 3 years ago. And it really bothered me. Like, I was very confused, like why he didn't reach out, because we were so connected. And he was like, I used to work with him. I used to treat him. I had done past life regressions on him. He really had a very deep spiritual bent. My body genetically is like my mother's. I'm a tank. I got that Kurdish. My father had a very, sort of very different body because of trauma and all else. So this is not going into 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I started having this terror about dying, which is really not mine, but it's not really dying. It's terror of like my prostate. My dad, one of the things he had when he was dying was prostate cancer. Now, I know my body really well. I know I've got no prostate issues, but I was feeling this crazy feeling. And when I was in pain, it was a pressure. But as a healer, I know what's the symptoms of prostatitis. It's like, these are not my stuff. Something's going on. And pretty quickly I connected. I was like, this is my father. This is stuff that my father, which was that root chakra, right, where the terror really sits. And when I say terror, it's not like a little fear of something. I mean, it's an abject terror. It's not even terror of death. It's a terror of annihilation.
Terror. Yeah.
Existential terror. Beautiful. I love that word.
Yeah.
It's existential, it's annihilation. So I'm sitting with this thing. I connected. So I start doing what I haven't done. Instead of like lighting candles, this and that, and I did a little bit of that, but I start just talking. Really from my heart, being like, man, my heart goes out to you, whatever this incarnation was about. And I love you so much, and I thank you. And, he was an amazing guy, terrible father, like just a level of like incapacity, right? For a guy like me, this soft alpha male, like we were like oil and water, but it's a lot of love there. But there was no communication at the end, as people who've suffered with a dear one has Alzheimer's. It's very painful, right? Because the person leaves and they're not there, the body's there, and then we're distant, different continents. So I really start connecting with this thing, and my heart starts softening in areas that I didn't realize that it had hardened. And I'm a very open-hearted guy, as you know. I was like, oh my God, this guy really, I heard the words of being wrapped in a blanket to left before dead. I heard the words of his brother when he's 5 years old burns in some kitchen accident. They don't have enough money to take the kid to the doctor, so the infant dies, and he carries the kid's little shirt for a year to smell it because he missed his brother. Like all this pain. And I soften, and I have these cries that I never had. Like when my father died, I didn't really cry. I felt grief, but I was weeping. Like this incredible thing happens, right? But this goes on for about a month, and the quote-unquote prostate pain, which wasn't again prostate pain, lifts, and my heart softens. And I had so much love for this man because he had really answered a life of brutality with a kindness that, he'd worked for UNICEF for 5 decades. I mean, he literally did for other children what wasn't done for him. Feed them, clothe them, school them, take care of them. Very, very beautiful stuff, right? So I get softer and softer, and my partner, who's very psychic, 2 Pisces living in a house, you don't even need to talk. It's just like everything's just so dialed in. She goes, you might want to go upstairs. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, your father is upstairs in bed. And he's wearing blue pajamas, which is so funny. My father used to wear blue pajamas. And he's a little boy. And I come upstairs, and it's always more difficult with your own ancestry or psychic work. It's very easy when you have someone there. And I was like, oh my God, it's my father's energies here. But now he's back as a little boy. Now, I mean, my heart literally just is opening, but also hurting as I say this story. He was exhausted. And he was exhausted because the way he died was in so much trauma and terror.
Yeah.
As someone who had, the Alzheimer's, and he was very, very disconnected at the end. He really couldn't connect. And my dad was highly, he was like the smartest guy I ever met. And I know a lot of smart people. His IQ was through the roof. So the tool that he had used to navigate the world, which was his mind, was useless, right? So he couldn't navigate. So he stayed in bed for almost 2 weeks. He wouldn't come down. And what I would do is, he loved sweets. Like, he had a real sweet tooth. So I would go buy the cakes that he loved, and I would set a place for him downstairs and eat the cake for him and have the plate for him, which is something that I always do when someone that I love dies. I'll go to their favorite restaurant or make their favorite meals and put a dish for them and serve them. It's a very powerful thing, right? So again, as our Mexican brethren say, people die twice. Once they die, and once you forget about them. So my point of saying this whole story is, this stuff is actually very powerful. In terms of the superego work that we were talking about last time, there is an ancestral line. And the ancestral line, I can't tell people what to do. I can just tell you that the stuff that my teachers did didn't work for me. As a Westerner, like, I did the candles, I did the Buddhist thing, I did I didn't connect with it. Part of it is when these things come up, when these emotions come up, when we have a thought, or when we're dealing with these things, to really just look at it from that lens as well.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or is this my father was like this, my grandfather was like this? And then I remembered this, me, my science background back in the day. I remember this thing, and I actually dug it up. It's so interesting how these things also scientifically have been shown, how when we talk about the superego and ancestral line, these things actually get passed on genetically. Now, as a guy who kind of studied that stuff, I have to say, I'm not a believer that just because you have the genes, you're going to get that. It's actually a bunch of bullshit. What it is nature and nurture. You can be born with certain things, and then depending how you respond to them, there's just, research up the wazoo, identical twins, both with schizophrenic predisposition. One fully has the breakdown, one doesn't. Is because how they were nurtured. There was a study done called the Dutch Hunger Winter. The Dutch Hunger Winter, end of World War II, occupied Holland, had a very rough winter for Holland, and 18 to 20,000 people died. And they did research, and pregnant women were very, very susceptible, obviously, to what was going on. So they did this research on the actual genetics of what was going on. And what they found is that they were doing genome sequencing. What they found was that the children were way more predisposed to a range of issues. And issues were schizophrenia, there was obesity, there was diabetes, and it was, the mechanism was DNA methylation, not important. But the amazing thing is like how these things are real. But the other amazing thing is, just because you have that predisposition, in my own experience, I don't have scientific research to back this down, although I'm sure that's going to come because people are doing great research now, doing the internal work that we talked about, right? Sitting with it, like for you, when you had your experience with the anxiety, it's a long-term survival thing. Yes, of course, it's from your childhood and all the ways, or from the same with me, but it's a deeper piece to this. So I just wanted to bring this into the discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it of, we're not just doing therapy or spiritual work or this or that with us, to have that awareness, right? When I say the Lakotas say 8 generations forward and backward, my Peruvian shamans would say it's more than that. It can be up to 9 to 10 generations. And again, we're not doing this to heal the ancestors. It's all for self. It's selfish, but it's actually, that part helps. And another part that I find helpful is, part of the intention is you ask for help.
Yeah.
You ask for help, right? You ask for help from the lineage. And again, I, with a very soft eye, look at people, you know what I mean, that love their grandparents, that love their great-grandparents, that have that beautiful experience, like, wonderful. I'm saying that's actually useful. That's actually, that love is more than that. And it's not just the negative things, it's the positive things, right? So for me, my lineage, and again, this is to say it's just genetics, it sort of strips it out of a certain warmth to it, which is actually spiritual power.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was anxiety and fear passed on to me because I come from a generation of people that literally were starving 67 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, my father was the smartest man that I ever met. He gave me that gift as well. He gave me a gift of an intellect that is really powerful. That's lineage. Now we can make, oh, genes, aren't you lucky? It's not luck. From our worldview, we incarnate into this system, especially people who are listening to this. Part of the work is to do that, to help the lineage healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stop there. I want to hear your ideas, your experiences around this, and if this resonates with you.
I mean, there's so much you brought today, and it was so touching. I mean, there's so much of you. There's so much of your story, and that really somewhat it lit a bunch of light bulbs in my head, especially in past experiences with patients and with people, because and I'm just ad-libbing here, but what you're telling me really connects to those moments where people might be experiencing intense emotions and not understanding why. And I think that that's where the superego comes in, because when they don't understand, and this is a question I get constantly in sessions, but why? But why am I feeling this? And the why is simply because they want to get rid of it, obviously. But the moment we stop asking ourselves why and start tolerating whatever is going on, we also open up to the possibility of understanding why, of getting the awareness, not with the intention of getting rid of whatever we're experiencing, but getting greater awareness, greater knowledge of, okay, what is happening here? And I think that what you provided today, which is something I actually had never thought about, is the fact that if we, I see it in steps. The first steps is resistance. No, I don't want this. The second step is, okay, I got this. How do I fix it? And the next step is, okay, I don't want to fix it. I'll just stay with it. But you're offering, and to me, this is a really big piece because I'd never thought of this. It's like you're offering the opportunity to say, okay, I am here with this. Tell me more. Which is exactly what we do in sessions with patients. Tell me more about what you're experiencing. We help people go deeper in their pain, in their whatever state they are. We don't try to get them out of it. We help them, you always say the only way out is in, because it's about going in. And it's not even about getting out of it. You get to a certain point where you don't necessarily want to get out of it. You're eventually going to get out of it because nothing's forever. But what you're offering is precious to me because it really tells me, okay, open your intuition. It's hard to be in your body so much with so much discomfort because you're totally focused on your body, and your mind is terrified because it says this might be forever. You might be like this forever, and it's fucking terrifying. But the moment we get a chance to stay with it and say, okay, now in this moment, I'm willing to stay with this. Tell me more, and really open to that. It really feels like there's so much more, like you're telling me, that can come through, an awareness about whose is this, because it's not necessarily mine. That's why it feels to me so heroic in a way, because we are doing the work for a greater good, our lineage, past and future. I mean, we don't know who our great-grandfather was, so there's not much we can know about these people, but there is the possibility to feel also a sense of purpose for this. What I'm experiencing, the pain I'm experiencing, has a purpose. Tell me more.
I love what you're saying. For me, again, me and you have discussed this. There's three things we do with these kinds of emotions. One is repress them.
Right.
One is act them out or get lost in them.
Mm-hmm.
And the third, which is what you're saying, which is why I also say to people, is just to feel it, to learn to tolerate it. Now, obviously, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I love what the thing you just said, and I brought back this line that I always love about we didn't know who our ancestors were. I certainly didn't. Somebody had asked the Buddha, what were my past lives? He had said, you want to see who you've been? Look who you are now.
Mm.
And then it said, well, Buddha, what are my future lives? You want to see where you're going? Look who you are now. That deceptively simple, almost quiche saying is actually really true, because the moment is all we have. But again, this thing that I'm really having more and more as I'm getting older, an experience of, it's all happening simultaneously.
Mm.
And there's something about little Ian, little Abdi that gets healed by Abdi and Ian as grown men talking here.
Yeah.
And there's certainly about that old geezers coming online, me sooner than you, that are also getting healed by this moment. And I've been so touched with our last couple of conversations, brother, about the softness that you carry, because ultimately it's about this softness, the softness towards self, right? People can have it for a loved person, a loved cat, a loved dog, animals, nature. Certainly have it towards self is very difficult, right? Certainly towards self. And then in the midst of a chaotic world, in the midst of a system that's based on constantly creating fear to control, when we say love is the answer, love, it's so difficult. It's not some flippant 60s bumper sticker. To do the love, you have to go through the fire. And man, it is a fire. And just to finish that story, I don't know if I did, he left. My father left. He never came as he didn't become an old man. He left as a child. And I got to love that child in a 2.5-week period in a way I was never loved as a child. I gave attention to that child in a way that I was never. I mean, these people didn't have the tools. I'm not saying that as a way of justifying it. I didn't even go there with it. But I also learned that I was like, this guy, how the hell was he going to give me? I mean, what he gave me is incredible.
Yeah.
The fact that I didn't get the shit kicked out of me, and I was a fucking wild child. The fact that he never raised a hand on me where he was getting beaten to almost death regularly, or the fact that he educated me and he wasn't a wealthy man. He made sure. He was like, dude, education is how we get out of this thing. Made sure, pushed me. It softened me in a way. And when he left as a child. And people go like, well, this is crazy. I don't connect with, I'm like, doesn't even matter. If we just take this as something psychologically that happened within me. It was my own child, let's say. It was my own, vision. This is the interesting thing. It makes fuck all difference.
Yeah.
It really is. But I can tell you, when he had died, as someone who works with death all the time, I knew he wasn't at peace. And I couldn't reach him.
Right.
I would do rituals. I would do things. I would just tell him. I would talk to him. It was literally like bringing, if you ever worked in a shelter with animals or something, when animals that are abused, it takes a while for them to trust you to even come near you for you to feed them. They'll be at the back of the cage. They don't come, they come. It takes time. So I also didn't realize this as I worked on it, because I was pissed at first. I was like, fuck you, dude. Like, I do this for a living. Everybody comes and says goodbye. Really? My own father? You don't come? Not connecting. That was my little boy being angry. Not connecting. Like, this poor guy was so terrorized that when he died in this confusion with people he didn't know, he didn't have money to stay here, so he had to go back to Iran to stay in a hospice there. It was so painful. But what was incredible is the levels of healing that happened. I can tell you, like, he was so tired. So he was sleeping in the bed. It was so sweet. I'd come up and be there and I'd just cuddle him. And when he left, it just was like the most beautiful. And something really softened inside of me that I wasn't even aware of that was there.
Yeah.
Right? Something lifted. And interestingly enough, like, my father had a very narcissistic bent, as a lot of people with deep trauma do. They're so damaged, they go into this narcissistic bent. This was also interesting. There were a couple of these super narcissists that were, I wouldn't say they were friends, but there were people that were in my circles that took a lot, gave nothing, but were annoying as hell. And they fell out of my life. I just woke up one day, I was like, meh, Homie, don't play that. I just was like, this is not good. So it's so interesting too how that healed. I'm actually just putting this together right now as I'm speaking to you. How there was these two relationships, men who had this similar one. They just dropped off. I just kind of realized what's going on. I was like, man, this doesn't work. So these healings are so profound.
Yeah.
Now, we're putting this all out there.
Yeah.
You might not be 62. You might not have had these experiences of me. What I'm offering you is the things that come up that you bang your head against, regardless of your age, regardless of your sex, regardless of your persuasion about anything. Investigate a little bit. Investigate. Is it just my experience, Ian, as this guy who had this experience, or is it possible something deeper? Is it something that you've seen over and over in a family? Right? And it's a feeling, right? It's not an intellectual thing, it's a feeling. And I love what you said. It's really about learning to tolerate these feelings when they come up, because they're not pleasant.
Right.
And it can be anxiety. This thing was like a terror, because, I can have things. That fear on that level is not a thing that I've experienced. I worked, not that we all have terror. I super mobilized myself as a human being. Being a master martial artist. Like, you cannot fuck with me. I'll destroy you. So as a little kid who got beat up, I was like, that ain't going to happen again. So I'm like highly trained that way. Used my psychic ability. I used everything to guard against that terror. So it was very foreign to me. But tolerating it was not fun. And it went on for a couple of months. And again, you go through the checklist. Like, is this actual cancer? I was like, well, no, it's not this. And go get tested, go get whatever. Is this something? No, it's not this. I've gone through a very traumatic experience last year. Nope, it's not that. This seems ancient. And the language was, this is ancient.
Yeah.
And then I just followed that. But I didn't in the immediate moment be like, oh, this is my father coming. It was nothing like that. So I just want to make that clear with people. If you're interested in this, find the thread. There'll be a thread sticking somewhere in the emotional body. Gently unravel it, right? The image of being this ball that's all mushed together. You just take one piece of it. And again, it's a process, not an event.
Right. Stay with it.
Stay with it. And, I've been saying this for a couple of years, and it's really my experience with myself and with the people that I have the good fortune to work with. There's a thinning, there's a narrowing, thinning of the wall between the visible and invisible. And I'll just leave it at that. So if you're interested in it, yes, there's a lot of trauma. Yes, there's a lot of pain in the world. And like we talked about last time, the cruelty of what we do to each other is incredible. That can only come from cruelty of self. Yeah. Taking these hardened positions and me and you and F you and this and that, this is the way. Again, it's an invitation. We all play for the same team. We all play for the same team. So let's just figure what that is. And why are we acting like there's another team? Who taught us that?
Yeah.
Where was this taught unconsciously? And again, tapping into the superego, the things, again, that you said, things that are there for protection in some ways. Don't step out of this, the self-judgment. These two are kind of married there. These two are married there, right? It's the psychological and the spiritual, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And as more and more we destroy everything from the past in the name of progress, as we walk away, some of it is healthy. Some of it is just old wives' tales. It doesn't make sense. Some of it, we're really throwing out gold here with the water. And only ourselves, and through the help of trusted others, can we kind of take that gold and filter it and do something with it. And is it scary? Yes. Is it painful? Yes. Do you have a choice? No, because this goes with you. Perfect example is looking at this lovely being who served and had done past life work with him. He had served in other incarnations. All he wanted was a family because he was a hunter-gatherer that was training other people's kids, and he came into this plane, and he did okay for his background. He didn't really experience fully what he came to experience because the pain was too much. So this stuff is real. As they say, if you want to get off that spinning wheel, meaning incarnation after incarnation, it's these things that unconsciously come up. Now, there's a lot of energy available for healing, right? So if you got enough time to throw a shoe at the TV, at Trump or whatever, like take some of that time at yourself and go inside. Be like, okay, what's going on in here?
Yeah.
What's going on in here? It's so easy to project these things outside, right? The thing we're talking about, the superego or these woundings, they're very easy to throw them out.
Yeah.
So if you're not sitting with this terror, you're going to throw this terror at other people. If you're not sitting with this anger, you're going to throw it at other people. Yes, it's psychology 101. But it seems like we're not really studying 101 because it's what we're doing.
Yeah. 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 And the more scared we are, the easier we got to take it. So in order just to talk to everybody, because we did a lot of work, which means we're more accustomed to that, but we work every day with people who are absolutely terrified to just put their toe in the water. So don't jump in the deep end. Just take a moment, be aware of what is already there. You don't have to do anything more than you're already doing. You just don't have to be pushing it away. Start with not pushing it away because it's there already.
And I love what you're saying. It really is that. And the reason I share these stories, I mean, sometimes people love these woo-woo stories because it gets them interested. So for me, I'll just put my cards on the table as a little trick to pull people in so they can do their goddamn work.
Yeah, and we can sell them big-ass courses.
Yeah. But I got to say, exactly. Yeah. Me and you at our T-shirt shop
right.
And the bumper sticker shop. It was really funny, the thing with the aunt thing with this guy was very interesting because I hadn't had one of those things happen for a while. Mm-hmm. And that was really a gift of the people that are listening. It was a gift for them, by them, funny enough. Yeah, it's, I've been doing this work since I was 16, 17, you as well. We're not saying this. All I'm saying, and I love what you said, actually, it only starts where you're at. And you can be like, well, I don't know my lineage. I have no idea what my lineage was. Those stories that I heard, right? I didn't live around my family. I traveled at a young age, left the country. I don't even have recall. Start with one of the things that comes up. Anger, anxiety, something that comes up all the time. Something that you might, if your parents are alive, or if you remember when they were alive, or if their grandparents are alive, it'll be very specific things. Some of them are wonderful things, right? Some of these lineage things, but that stuff is easy. But what are the things? And the fear one is a big one. Mm-mm. And they're very specific fears, right? It'll be fear of don't do this or this can happen. There'll be certain languages that are, you can't trust people. Mm-hmm. You'll always get fucked over. Mm-hmm. People always betray you. There'll be very specific lines that come up, right?
Yeah.
So that would be to your point, pick that up.
Yeah.
And again, maybe 99 out of 100 just doesn't make sense. You don't need to do anything lineage. Just maybe you think we're a bunch of nuts talking about I see dead people. It's that's a joke I made with the guy, by the way. What was that movie? I forget the movie. He was
Sixth Sense?
saying something. You're Sixth Sense. He was like, well, what kind of work do you do? And I was like, I see dead people. And we're both laughing, which actually do. But it was really funny, that piece. So you don't need to see dead people, but they never die. It's all a part of it. Well, it's not even you have to believe in afterlife. We're not talking about that. They're living in you. Right? People used to say this to me, my teachers, and I never connected with it. I was like, I get it, live with me. But as you get older, you go wow, there's these certain behaviors, right? There's certain behaviors, keeping secrets, exaggerating things to look better. These things that me and you see every day, we see in ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it has to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And if you don't reckon with it, this is not a threat. It's it just makes the quality of life that much less enjoyable, because in order to shove these things down, it's a thermometer. You can't just, a thermostat, I'm sorry. You can't just turn it down in the living room and think it doesn't go on everywhere else. You're going to freeze your ass up when you're sleeping. Yeah. So if that thermostat of this is so painful, I'm going to turn this down, everything gets turned down.
Yeah.
Your experience with your animal gets turned down. Your experience with your lover, your experience of friend, your experience of your art, your experience of your work, whatever you love, everything gets turned down. So it's sort of, when you do this work, it goes from black and white to color. Mm-hmm. People are probably too young. Most people listening to me, and I remember in these countries that I lived, there was no TV, and then there was 2 hours of black and white cartoon, and all of a sudden it was color. It was whoa, it's a whole different experience. Mm-hmm. So part of the invitation here, again, it's not, oh, bummer, here we go, another bummer podcast. Oh, what do we gotta do? No, man, it's short. This life goes quick. Mm-hmm. Turn up the volume, turn up the color. Mm-hmm. And that can only be done with this. And the instruction manual is inside of you.
Yeah.
Right? You just, again, to the beautiful thing that you said, brother, just sit with it and feel what's up and tolerate that. It's going to guide you piece by piece.
Yeah. And remember,
I was not...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And remember, it's never too much for you to handle. You're
Love
never
that.
given more than you can handle. So even if it feels overwhelming, you can handle that.
So this is huge what you're saying. And because this comes up a lot for me with my patients. I can't handle this. We both can tell you 6 years experience between both of us of clinical practice. It never is more than handle. And certainly many, many times it feels it's more than you can handle.
Yeah, definitely.
But it isn't more than you can handle. The psyche has that. When you have that psychic break or something, even there's a place, there's something to be taught there. Don't shove this stuff down.
Yeah.
Make a little bit of room for it. And you can talk to your psyche like, hey, man, this is too much. Can we back up? I'm going to do the work. But certainly you can't shut it down because then it'll knock a lot of it. But that conversation, like, I can handle so much. We need to back up.
Yeah. And it reminds me of something else, that a lot of it is in our idea of what certain emotions are and whether we can tolerate them or not. I remember this episode. I mean, my levels of tolerance of pain are so low. I think I'm like 6 months old in my ability to tolerate pain. And I remember I was having huge, I don't know exactly what the name in English for this is, but I mean, I was experiencing huge pains in my abdomen, and I was like, I can't stand this. I can't stand this. And it obviously wasn't stopping, but I kept repeating, I can't stand this. And then one day, because I've had those problems for a while at that time, I told myself, but what if I liked this? I'm sure I can withstand the same kind of pain if I'm having sex, but it's contextualized in sex, so I can stand it. Why can't I stand it here? So I started repeating to myself, oh, I love this. Oh, I love this. Oh, I love this. And I got to a place, and it never happened again, unfortunately. But in that moment, I almost felt post-orgasmic. I felt so relaxed and so much endorphins while I was experiencing atrocious abdomen pain. So it's really about what we convince ourselves we can stand or not. And here I'm not saying, obviously, we need to start being able to withstand huge amounts of pain, but sometimes even just this much, we feel it's too much, or we think it's too much, actually. So convincing ourselves we can handle it, it's not too much, just stay with it. And that's what we do with patients, they come with us, no, it's too much. Well, let's try it again. I'm here with you, and they can see themselves that can stand more and more. So that's a lot in our head too.
Yeah, it's totally cultural training. It's familial training, 100%. Back in the day, I used to work in a biofeedback clinic. I was really interested in biofeedback. And biofeedback being that you attach electrodes that read your brain waves, EMG, electromyograph, they read your musculature. So I used to work in this very intense pain clinic. People had serious injuries. And it was very interesting to me as a guy who was a meditator. The reason it interested me because you could actually see on a screen if people were meditating or not, or in their body. One of the very interesting things, to your point, that we found out, and these were people who had like severe spinal injuries and car accidents, motorcycle accidents. One of the things that was interesting was when people were in pain. But I'm talking pain, like there's a pain scale when you measure 0 to 10, and like your pain in that moment would have probably been like 8 or 10. 10 is like so deep that even morphic drips basically help. So one of the things that I learned doing that was, when you get in that kind of pain, and we do this also emotionally, people really go into their head. They abdicate the body to go into the head. So part of the language, I can't do this, I can't do this. So what happens, all the energy, quote unquote, is in the head.
Right.
So if you get people, and you would have these biofeedbacks that are getting feedbacks from their biology, if you could get them to come out of their head, and not even so that they could say what you're saying, which is brilliant, but they could just actually physically put the attention on their extremities. So they had really bad neck pain, just feel your fingers, feel your feet. And through the biofeedback, teach them to do that. The pain would drop. But I'm talking the pain would drop from a 9 or 10 to like a 5. Right? So there's, from a Chinese medicine or martial arts perspective, where your awareness is where the energy flows.
Right.
So if you're in your head all the time, all the juice goes into your head. If you're feeling the extremities, the energy comes down. So again, to your point of saying that, that's why it's actually orgasmic, because the energy is actually moving that, right? The musculature actually relaxes. If I tell you try to relax, oxymoron. If I had to have you feel your extremities. So to your point there, that's a real thing physiologically, scientifically proven.
Right.
You want to go down. And again, it's about tolerating. Now, again, the things we were talking about last time, distraction is the number one tool that ineffectively we use to try to deter or defer this pain, which doesn't work because it also amplifies. Because, the psyche is real. It's trying to get your attention for something. It's not an asshole. It's trying to say, this needs to be addressed, brother. Like, let sister open this door. Yeah. So I love that thing. So again, an invitation. You don't need to have a dead relative come and visit you. You can literally be like, here's this thing. Yeah. Here's this thing that's up. You don't even have to use the word lineage or whatever. Forget about that. Like, wow, this is something that's been with me since I was a kid.
Right.
Everyone has one or two things, right? There's something.
Yeah.
Feeling like a piece of shit, feeling ugly, feeling too skinny, feeling too fat, whatever it is. And you go like, well, sure, the culture is insane. We know that. Everyone has an eating disorder. But what else is it?
Right.
Right? Part of the super ego thing, similar to ancestral stuff, can be nonverbal. I have patients who have eating disorders whose mothers had serious eating disorders, never uttered a word to them. The mother was conscious enough not to say, hey, you're to this, you're to that. But just by the actions of the mother, working out for hours a day, for real, eating one bowl of soup a day, the child actually picked that up. Right. And the child who's a 40-year-old now would say to me, well, yeah, my mother never said anything. Well, this is the ancestral stuff I'm talking about. This is part of that lineage, right? So again, sitting with these things. Now, this lovely soul figured that out by sitting with herself like, oh my God, I would always say my mother never said anything to me about food, but I would watch her literally work out for all these hours. I would watch her be so skinny. And I was like, that's what I picked up. Even though my mother was very kind, the ancestral stuff gets passed on. So it's not always like waggy finger.
Yeah.
Right? So I love the thing that you said. It really all comes down to tolerating. Now, in order to tolerate, you have to know something is up. And in order to know something is up, this goes back to what me and you always talk about.
Yeah.
Spend a couple of minutes and feel.
Pay attention.
And attention is all day long. You don't need to. If you don't have time to sit, you don't need. But you certainly know, like we talked about, the days when you just can't stop. Those are the days you got to pay the most attention. Second cup of coffee goes in, or, I got to do this I got to fix this thing right before I go to sleep. It's like, whoa. Those are the times you just sit your ass down 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Then go on.
Right.
Then go on.
Right. And I always tell my patients who tell me they don't have time to, to meditate, to do EFT or whatnot, just do it when you're on the toilet. You go there at least once a day.
Yeah.
Then you can do it. You do have the time, but still you choose to bring your phone in the toilet. Just, we do have the time, even though we think we don't, but we do have the time.
We really do.
Yeah.
So again, as a clinician who's been doing this for a long time, it's amazing how much slower things were 40 years ago, for real. And yes, the powers that be and everyone's, trying to maximize forced labor, basically, white collar or otherwise. I get all that. But it's also this thing where we're feeding the distraction has become a compulsion. It's not just addiction, it's also compulsion. There's a difference there, right? Compulsion is trained. So that part of it, again, make it a part of life.
Right.
Like literally from the time you put on your coat to go outside, when you take your coat off and come inside, feeding your cat, just make these things a part of it. It's not about just sitting meditation. I find I actually catch things during the day. When I'm about to step out and do something, I just feel something like, oh, I'm a little this today, or like, oh, I'm really relaxed today. Oh. So it just becomes, as you say beautifully, awareness in the moment constantly. It's not that I'm living now meditating. Awareness becomes a part of it.
Yeah.
This whole thing that I described was not me meditating. It just was like coming up, and I took a mental note. I was like, that's weird. Like I'm feeling this thing.
Yeah.
Then you go through the checks. Like, that's weird. Oh, that. So then it's that. So again, the instruction manual is in there. Once something comes up, it comes up with it.
Yeah.
People have these questions all the time, right? It's like, oh, give me this answer. I'm just like, well, you're asking a question. If you sit with it, really the answer comes. Is this the right person to be with? Is this the right job? I'm like, first of all, if you're asking a question, something's up. So already right there, you should know.
Exactly.
If you're feeling uncomfortable, something is up.
Right.
sit with it, because I also know if I answer the question, 10 more questions will come up.
Exactly.
Which
So
means
you don't need to know why. Stop
Yes, I love
asking
what you said,
yourself questions. Whenever you're trying to get an answer is when you're running away. The answers will come if they need to come.
Yes.
But if you are really trying to understand what's going on, you're bailing.
Beautiful.
So just take that as a, as a pointer. Am I thinking too much about it? That's because you're not allowing yourself to feel it.
Yes.
And if you manage to stay with it and tolerate it, whatever answers you need, truly need, will eventually come as awareness, though, not as answers. And they're two very different things, One is the intuitive process, the other is a deductive process. So don't want to go there. Or somebody else's experience. If it's yours and it's for you to know, then just stay with it and the awareness will come eventually if you need it. If not, still stay with it.
This is wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that. That feels so good what you said. I love you very much, but I got to say, I'm so jealous that you had an Italian Easter food and I got to do the American Easter food. So just with that, it's going to be a little bit of a problem here, but I'll work through it. I'll sit with it. I'll process my emotions, but I still love you.
Yeah. Book a trip to Italy next Christmas. Come at Christmas and you'll see.
I love it, man. I've been in Roma in Easter. Oh my God. You boys know how to party. I'll give you that.
Yeah. And thank you so much for what you chose to share today. That was really touching.
Thank you for being there, brother.
Yeah.
This is really wonderful. I've been really enjoying it to have a like-minded other to share this stuff with. And So until next time.
Absolutely. Let's keep going.
Ciao, ciao.
Take care.
So much love for you.
Love you.
You too.
Ciao, bello.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.